This is my true story. I was a man who believed love mattered more than gold. I worked with my hands, I saved what little I could, and I thought loyalty was enough to build a marriage. But betrayal came dressed in silk. My wife left me for a millionaire, calling me poor and useless. That wound cut deep, but it did not break me. Instead, it gave me fire. I waited, I planned, and I struck. You won't believe what I did next. Before that, tell me. If the person you built your life for betrayed you this way, would you forgive, or would you make them remember your worth? Please subscribe so you don't miss what I did next. I gave her my loyalty, my wages, and my best years. I was not a man of riches, but I was a man of effort. Every morning before the sun rose, I left for work with my lunch wrapped in a paper bag, and every evening I returned home tired but content, believing my sacrifice was building something real. She was there, waiting with a smile. At least, that is what I told myself. I thought her smile meant love. I thought her hand in mine meant forever. I thought her eyes saw me as enough. But the truth is, she wanted more than I could ever give. I worked in factories, on construction sites, and later even cleaned offices at night just to bring home a little extra. My hands were rough, my back carried pain, but in my heart there was pride. I never once kept a coin for myself. Every dollar I earned, I gave to her. If she wanted a dress, I found a way. If she wanted a nice dinner, I skipped my own meal to save the money. I thought that was what a husband was meant to do. Give everything without question. There were nights when I came home hungry, but I smiled because I knew she had eaten well. There were winters when my shoes had holes, but I smiled because she wore new boots. I thought this was love, sacrifice made into daily bread. She looked beautiful in public, and I walked beside her with pride. People said we were a strong couple. People said we looked happy. They didn't see what happened when the doors closed at night. In private, her smile would fade. She would look at me, not with love, but with hunger for something else. Not hunger for food, not hunger for touch, but hunger for wealth. She wanted bigger houses, brighter jewelry, and vacations to faraway lands. She would drop hints, then she would complain, and sometimes she would snap. Why can't you be more? Why can't you give me what I deserve? Those words cut me deeper than any knife. But I swallowed them. I told myself it was just frustration. I told myself tomorrow she would see my love and realize it was enough. I tried to stretch myself thin to please her. I took double shifts. I borrowed small loans just to surprise her with gifts I could not afford. I stayed awake at night, staring at the ceiling, thinking how to give her more. And yet, no matter what I did, it was never enough. The dresses were never fancy enough. The dinners were never fine enough. The life I gave her was never rich enough. She began to compare. I heard the names of her friends' husbands, men with businesses, men with cars I could not buy, men who took their wives to places I could only dream of. Each name was like a blade pushed into my chest. Still, I stayed loyal. I thought patience would win her back. I thought if I just worked harder, one day she would see that love mattered more than gold. I believed marriage was not about money, but about standing side by side through storms. I wanted to believe she felt the same, so I ignored the signs. I ignored the late nights when she came home smelling of perfume I didn't buy. I ignored the secretive phone calls. I ignored the sudden distance when she turned her back in bed. My heart wanted peace, so my mind closed its eyes. But deep inside, I knew. The marriage I thought I had was already broken. I was living in a shadow, clinging to a picture that no longer existed. She was already gone in spirit, waiting only for the moment to leave in body. And yet, even as I carried that weight, I loved her. Foolish, yes, but love does not ask for logic. Love asks for trust, and I gave mine until it bled me dry. I remember one winter night especially. I had come home after 14 hours of work, my boots soaked, my hands numb from cold. I placed my pay envelope on the table, proud that I had earned enough for her to buy the coat she had been talking about. She looked at the envelope, then at me, and instead of thanks, her lips curled in disappointment. "Is this it?" she asked. That night, I realized no amount would ever be enough for her. I could give her my blood, my years, my very soul, and she would still look past me for something shinier. Still, I clung to the hope that maybe time would change her. I told myself people mature, people learn, people realize what matters. But instead of softening, her hunger grew sharper. I was not a husband to her anymore. I was a stepping stone, a placeholder until she found what she believed she deserved. In public, she kept the mask, smiling and holding my arm. But in her eyes, when she thought I wasn't watching, I saw contempt. I saw calculation. I saw the truth that love had died long before she left me. I had built my life on an illusion. The marriage I thought I had was nothing but smoke. I thought I was her partner, but to her, I was only a servant. I thought I was her world, but to her, I was only a cage she wanted to escape. And the cruelest part? She let me believe. She let me carry the weight of faith while she planned her escape into another man's arms. Looking back, I see it clearly now. Love is not about how much you give if the other person only takes. A marriage cannot survive on one person's sacrifice while the other's heart is elsewhere. I was blind because I wanted to be. I wanted to believe in the story of us. I wanted to believe that all my effort was building a home, when in truth, I was building a prison for myself and a doorway for her to walk away. That was the marriage I thought I had. One built on my loyalty, my wages, my best years. But beneath the surface, it was already rotting. She smiled in public, yes, but in private, she craved more than I could ever give. And it was only a matter of time before the mask slipped and the truth came out in the most brutal way. The night she left me is carved into my memory like a scar that will never fade. It was not sudden. It was the end of a long road of quiet betrayals and hidden contempt. But when it came, it struck like lightning. We were sitting at the kitchen table, the same table where we had shared meals, laughter, and dreams years ago. I thought we would grow old there together. Instead, I watched the woman I had loved for decades turn into a stranger before my eyes. She looked at me with a smirk that carried no kindness, no hesitation. Her voice was calm, but every word was a dagger. "You'll always be poor," she said. "I need a man who can give me more." Those words cut through me, sharper than any blade. All the sacrifices I had made, all the long nights, all the missed meals, all the broken bones from years of labor. In her eyes, they meant nothing. My love was worthless because my pockets were empty. I remember gripping the edge of the table, my knuckles white, as if holding on to the wood could somehow hold on to her. I wanted to beg her to stay. I wanted to tell her love mattered more than gold, that marriage was not about money, but about loyalty. But when I looked into her eyes, I saw no room for such words. She had already left me in spirit. She was not looking at her husband anymore. She was looking at a man who had failed her twisted version of success. And then she said the words that shattered what little strength I had left. "I've found someone else." I didn't need to ask who. I had seen the signs. The expensive perfume, the new jewelry I never bought, the late nights explained with flimsy lies. And now it was clear. She had found her millionaire, and she was walking out of our life together with him. The sound of her footsteps echoed like a drumbeat of betrayal as she packed her bags. She didn't look back. She didn't even cry. Her laughter carried from the doorway as she called someone on the phone, her voice soft and sweet in a way it had not been with me for years. A car horn honked outside, and she stepped into the night, her hand sliding into the arm of another man. A man who had wealth, not love. A man who had gold, not sacrifice. I sat alone at that table for hours, staring at the empty chair across from me. The silence of the house felt heavier than any weight I had carried at work. The bed was cold that night, colder than any winter. I was not just abandoned, I was discarded, like an old coat no longer useful. The whispers began almost immediately. Friends who once smiled at us now whispered behind closed doors. Neighbors who once admired our marriage now pitied me. Some even laughed, saying I should have seen it coming, that love without money is a fool's dream. Their words pressed down on me like chains, but the heaviest weight of all was my own heart. I replayed her last words over and over. "You'll always be poor." I need a man who can give me more. Humiliation followed me everywhere. At the market, people looked at me with sympathy I did not ask for. At church, they spoke to me gently, as though I was a broken man beyond repair. My pride crumbled piece by piece. And yet, deep inside that pain, something else began to stir. A small, burning flame that whispered, "This is not the end." The cruel goodbye was not just her betrayal. It was the mirror it held up to my life. I had given everything to someone who measured me only by what I lacked. I had built my world around her, and in one night she tore it down without mercy. That night I thought I had lost everything. But what I truly lost was the illusion that love had ever been enough for her. And in that emptiness, a new thought began to take root. If she valued wealth above loyalty, then let the world see who she really was. She thought she had left me broken, but she had forgotten one thing. I still carried the truth, and the truth has a power that money can never buy. After she left, the house became a graveyard. Every room echoed with memories I could not escape. The bed was half empty, the kitchen was silent, and the table where we once sat felt like a monument to my failure. I would wake in the night and reach across the sheets, only to find cold air where her warmth used to be. Days blurred into weeks, but the pain did not soften. Instead, it grew sharper, like a thorn buried deep in my chest that refused to come out. Friends whispered about me when they thought I could not hear. Some pitied me, offering hollow words of comfort that only reminded me of my loss. Others mocked me, saying I had been a fool to believe love mattered more than money. Neighbors avoided my eyes, ashamed for me, or curious to see how far I would fall. I carried their stares like stones in my pockets, heavy and humiliating. The betrayal was not just between her and me anymore. It was a story told in every corner of the town, and I was the punchline. And she was not content to leave me in silence. No, she flaunted her new life. I saw her stepping out of cars that I could never afford, her arm linked with the millionaire who had replaced me. Her dresses sparkled, her laughter rang out, her rings shone like trophies of my defeat. Every time I caught a glimpse of her, it was as though she twisted the knife deeper. She wanted me to see. She wanted me to drown in the shame of being left behind. I tried to harden myself, but the wound would not heal. I worked longer hours just to escape the thoughts that haunted me. I tried to drown the pain in routine, but each night when I came home to the empty house, it greeted me with silence so loud it screamed. I ate meals alone, walked alone, sat alone, and carried memories that would not die. I remembered her laugh in the early days, her soft voice when she once said she loved me. I wondered if any of it had ever been true, or if I had been living in a lie from the very beginning. What broke me most was the humiliation. People do not see the effort you gave, the sacrifices you made. They see only the ending, and my ending, in their eyes, was failure. I was the poor man whose wife left him for a richer one. They did not see the nights I worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. They did not see the years I gave away without complaint. They saw only that she chose gold over me, and to them, that meant she was right. But in the middle of that humiliation, something inside me began to shift. My heart was cracked, yes, but my mind was sharpening. Pain has a strange way of clearing your vision. What once blinded me with love now revealed itself in cruel detail. I saw her not as the woman I adored, but as the woman she truly was. Greedy, selfish, and willing to destroy loyalty for wealth. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I was not powerless. I carried something she had forgotten, the truth of who she was when the mask slipped. Because she had not always been careful. In her anger, in her drunken nights, in her moments of rage, she had spoken words she could never take back. I had saved them, recordings of her voice, spilling secrets, mocking me, admitting to things that would ruin her if the world knew. Affairs, lies, money stolen from our accounts. At the time, I had kept them only to remind myself I was not crazy, that her cruelty was real. But now, as I sat alone with my pain, those recordings began to feel less like memories and more like weapons. The wound would not heal, But in that wound grew a plan. She thought she had won. She thought she had buried me in shame and moved on to her perfect life. But I knew something she did not. The past does not stay hidden forever. And if she wanted to live like a queen, I would make sure her crown was torn off in front of everyone. What she did not know was that I had kept pieces of her truth hidden away like secret blades. In the years of our marriage, when her temper spilled over, she said things she thought would vanish into the air. But words do not vanish. I had learned to save them. Sometimes it was by accident, sometimes on purpose. But I had recordings, her voice sharp and bitter, her confessions pouring out when she thought no one would hear again. I had kept them in a drawer, hidden beneath old papers, as if even I was ashamed of how dark they were. At first, I told myself I had saved them because I wanted proof for myself. Proof that I was not imagining her cruelty. Proof that her lies were real. When she laughed at me, when she called me worthless, when she told me no woman would ever want a man as poor as me, I pressed record. When she shouted late at night about money she had taken without asking, I pressed record. When she slipped and admitted she had met men while I worked, I pressed record. Each time, I stored the file away and tried to forget it. But they were there, waiting. In those recordings, her mask was gone. She was not the smiling woman in her glittering dress. She was not the devoted partner she pretended to be in public. No, in those recordings she was raw, venomous, and reckless. She admitted to things that could break her reputation forever. She laughed about using me, mocked me for being blind, and even bragged about how she could twist any man around her finger if she wanted. One night I listened to them again, sitting in the dark of my empty house. Her voice filled the room like a ghost. "He thinks I love him," she said in one recording, her tone dripping with contempt. "But all I need is his money. When that runs dry, I'll find better." Another clip captured her laughing as she admitted to stealing from our account. "He works like a mule, and I spend it all. He'll never know. And if he finds out, what will he do? Nothing. He's too weak." I sat there with my hands trembling, not from sorrow, but from something else. Realization. I had in my possession her true face, captured in her own words. Words that no millionaire's money could erase. Words that would burn her perfect image to the ground if ever revealed. And then, a darker recording still. One I had almost forgotten. Her drunken voice, slurred but clear enough. "I've cheated more than once. He's too stupid to notice. Men with money, men with power. I deserve them, not him." My chest tightened as I heard it again, but I did not cry this time. I smiled. Because while she thought she had destroyed me, she had left behind the seeds of her own downfall. I realized then that I had been sitting on a weapon all along. Not a gun, not a fist. But the one thing more dangerous than any blade, the truth spoken in her own voice. She had thought herself untouchable now that she stood beside her millionaire, dressed in gold and admired by all. But the higher she climbed, the further she had to fall. And with these recordings, I held the rope that could pull her down in front of everyone she tried to impress. For weeks, I carried the thought quietly. I went to work. I ate in silence. I endured the whispers of neighbors. But in my mind, the plan was already forming. I no longer thought of her betrayal as a wound. I thought of it as fuel. Every laugh she shared with her new man, every glance she gave me filled with pity or triumph, became another log on the fire. The recordings were my answer. They were the proof that would strip away the mask she wore, leaving her exposed before the very world she wanted to fool. I kept the files safe, locked away, but I began to imagine the day I would use them. Not in secret, not whispered to a friend, but in the most public way possible. If she had humiliated me before the whole town, then before the whole town she would face the echo of her own voice, her darkest words, her cruelest secrets, her confessions of greed and infidelity. They would not stay hidden. They would be her undoing. And when I heard news of her wedding, that perfect fairy tale event she had built with her millionaire, I knew the time had come. The recordings would not stay buried any longer. She thought her future was secure, sealed with rings and vows. But she had forgotten the past. and I carried the past in my hands like fire waiting to be unleashed. The news of her wedding spread faster than wildfire. One morning, I saw the invitation for the first time. White card, golden letters, her name printed proudly beside his. It was not just a wedding, it was a statement. She wanted everyone to see how far she had risen, how she had left behind the poor man she once called her husband and stepped into the arms of wealth. The date was set, the hall chosen, the guest list filled with names of influence. Her fairy tale was ready to be told, and I was expected to watch from the shadows. People whispered in the streets, their voices thick with excitement. "Did you hear? She's marrying the millionaire." Some smiled, some sighed, some shook their heads at me in pity. To them, it was the final proof that money wins, that loyalty and sacrifice mean nothing in a world blinded by gold. I felt their eyes burning holes in my back when I walked past. They thought I would hide, that I would never dare show my face on that day. But deep inside, I smiled to myself, because they did not know what I held. And then came the call. Late one evening, my phone rang. It was her. For a moment, my heart betrayed me, hoping it was some sign of regret, some sliver of the woman I had once loved. But her voice cut away that foolish thought at once. She laughed. Not the laugh of joy, but the laugh of cruelty I had come to know too well. "Don't bother showing up," she said, her tone sharp and mocking. "You'll embarrass yourself in rags. This wedding isn't for people like you." Her words were acid poured into an open wound. But instead of breaking me, they hardened me. She believed she had erased me, that I was nothing but a poor man she had stepped over on her climb to riches. She wanted me silent, humiliated, forgotten. What she didn't know was that with every cruel word, she was tightening the noose around her own neck. I hung up without reply. I did not argue. I did not beg. Silence was my answer. But in that silence, I made a promise to myself. If she wanted an audience for her perfect day, I would give her one. If she wanted to wear the mask of purity and loyalty before the town, I would tear it off at the very moment she thought she had won. The world would not see her fairy tale. They would see her truth. The days that followed were heavy with planning. I kept my routine, working as if nothing had changed, walking with my head low. No one suspected. They thought I was broken, licking my wounds while she prepared for her grand moment. But behind closed doors, I moved with precision. I spoke to people quietly, made the right calls, and slipped the recordings into safe hands. The pieces of her voice, her laughter about cheating, her confessions of theft, her cruel mocking of me, they were no longer just memories in my drawer. They were tools waiting for the right hour. As the wedding day approached, the town grew restless with anticipation. Talk of the flowers, the dress, the millionaire's wealth filled every corner. People imagined the glitter of chandeliers, the clink of crystal glasses, the spectacle of her walking down the aisle. She had built the stage perfectly, inviting everyone she wanted to impress. And I, the man she tried to erase, would be there too. Not in rags, not in shame, but as the shadow waiting to strike. The irony of it all was bitter and sweet. She thought she had buried me, yet her voice, the very proof of her greed and betrayal, was alive in my hands. She thought wealth would shield her, but her own words were sharper than any blade. And when the moment came, when the hall was silent and all eyes were on her, I would let the truth speak louder than gold. Her wedding was not just her celebration, it would become her trial, and she would not walk out with a crown. She would walk out with nothing but shame. I did not rush. Revenge is not a storm that crashes without warning. It is a slow wind, quiet at first, but strong enough to topple walls when the time is right. After I heard the wedding announcement and her cruel words on the phone, I sat down at my old wooden desk and began to think. I had no wealth to fight her new life. I had no friends in high places to ruin her name. But I had something sharper than any blade, something louder than any insult, her own voice, recorded in secret, waiting like a weapon. The first thing I did was make sure the recordings would never be lost. I copied them onto small devices, hidden in different places. One inside a drawer at home, one with me at all times, and one with a cousin who owed me a favor. If one was destroyed, another would survive. I could not risk losing the truth. I played them again, carefully listening to the venom in her voice, her laughter about cheating, her pride in stealing, her mockery of the man she thought I was. Every word burned, but every word gave me strength. Then I thought of the wedding hall. I had been there before, long ago, when times were kinder. I knew its layout, the chandeliers hanging heavy above, the stage where vows were spoken, the sound booth where microphones and speakers could be controlled. That booth became the center of my plan. I would not shout. I would not interrupt like a madman. I would let her own words speak for me. All I needed was one hand to press play at the right moment. I spoke to a technician who worked at the hall, a quiet man who handled sound and light for events. He did not need to know the truth. I only told him I wanted a short special slide played during the wedding. I slipped him a small payment, money I had saved from working late shifts. He agreed, thinking it was a harmless request from an old man. I thanked him and left, my heart steady. But I knew I needed more. I found a woman I trusted, a distant cousin, someone who worked with decorations at the hall. She was not close to me, but she had once owed me kindness. I gave her one of the devices, hidden inside an old Bible. I told her to press the button when the time was right. She did not ask questions, only nodded, believing it was something small. She never knew the storm she was about to unleash. As the days passed, I lived like a shadow. I went to work. I walked the same streets. I listened to the whispers of neighbors. They thought I was broken, a man humiliated beyond repair. Let them think that. A man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous kind of man. And I had nothing left, except the truth. Each night, I imagined the scene. The chandeliers glowing, the guests dressed in gold, the millionaire smiling as she walked down the aisle in her white dress. I pictured the silence that would fall when her voice, her true voice, filled the room. Her laughter about cheating, her bragging about money stolen, her words calling her new husband nothing more than a wallet. I imagined the faces of the guests, their eyes turning from her beauty to her betrayal. And I imagined her face, pale, trembling, broken under the weight of her own confession. But I also planned my escape. Revenge was not my prison. It was my door to freedom. Once the recordings played, I would not stay to watch the fire burn for long. I bought a bus ticket with cash, packed a small suitcase with only what I needed, and hid it near the station. I would expose her, then vanish, leaving behind the man she had tried to bury. She left me for wealth, but I would leave her with shame. That was enough. By the night before the wedding, everything was in place. The devices were ready. The technician believed he was running a small favor. The cousin knew her part. And I, the poor man she laughed at, would sit quietly in the back row, waiting for the moment when truth would speak louder than vows. The plan was not loud, not violent, but it was final. Once it began, there would be no stopping it. I slept well that night for the first time in months. The plan was set, the stage was hers, but the story was mine. The day of the wedding felt like a small sun rising on a town built of gossip and bright cloth. I woke early, though sleep had been thin. My hands trembled not from fear, but from the weight of what I carried. I dressed in my best, which was not much, but it was clean and pressed. I put on a coat that had seen better years, smoothed the collar, and walked to the hall with the slow pace of a man who knows this will be the last time he stands where his past was made and unmade. When I arrived, the place was full of light and sound, laughter like silver coins, music tuning up, voices greeting each other with the soft pride of people who believe they are witnessing something grand. The chandeliers threw small stars across the floor, and flowers smelled like summers I had never bought. Guests wore new suits and fine dresses, and cameras sat ready like quiet birds. I moved to the back and took a seat where eyes would not linger long. I wanted to be seen, but only when the truth began to move. She entered like someone born to applause. Her dress flowed like river water, white and proud. The millionaire stood at the front, steady and sure, his face bright as if he had won something the world agreed to envy. People rose, phones lifted, and for a moment the room held only that glittering image: the bride, the groom, the promise of new beginnings. My chest ached, not from the sight, but from the memory of a life once shared beneath a different light. I kept my face still. I let my heart learn to be quiet. Vows started. Soft words, tender lines practiced and polished. Everyone leaned in as if listening to a new kind of scripture. I watched her mouth shape the promises she would say, the same mouth that had once whispered other names in the dark. I felt the technician's hands at the soundboard nearby, steady as a surgeon's. I felt the cousin in the booth above, fingers near a small device hidden in the Bible. I felt my own breath, measured, slow, ready. Then came the moment I had waited for. A pause between the vows, a ribbon of silence the speaker had left for a special reading. The cousin reached into the Bible, her finger finding the small switch I'd hidden. I saw nothing dramatic in the move. It looked like any small duty. But when the device started, the speakers carried a voice that did not belong to a poet or priest. It belonged to her. At first the sound was soft, then clearer, then cruel. Her voice, the one I had kept for months like a sleeping animal, filled the room. It spoke not of love, but of plans. It spoke of cheating and laughter about affairs, of joking about how she had used me and how easy it had been to hide what she took. The words moved through the chandeliers, down the rows of guests, into the stomachs of people who had come to celebrate. Glasses stopped mid-air. Conversations died. Phones lowered as faces turned toward the sound. People blinked, confusion drawing lines across their features. A murmur rose like wind. Then the words sharpened. Admissions of theft, confessions of mockery, boasts about tricking a poor man into working his life away. Her voice laughed on the recording, cruel and bright, the laughter that had haunted me in sleepless nights. I watched her hands. They went to her mouth, trembling. Color left her face like paint washed away. The millionaire's smile faltered and then vanished. He reached for her, but she was already slipping on the surface of her own downfall. Guests rose as if pulled by strings. Faces I had known for years hardened into judgment. Some put hands to mouths. Some whispered loudly, their voices sharp with the new knowledge. The chandeliers kept their light, but the room darkened in a different way. A dark made of truth exposed. She tried to speak, to stop the sound, but the recordings kept going. She stood frozen, the perfect bride turned statue of shame. The millionaire looked at her like a man who had bought a promise and found a rotten box inside. He pulled the ring, the symbol of their new contract, from his finger and threw it to the floor in a rush of anger. People left in a slow, stunned procession. Chairs scraped, heels clicked, and the hall emptied with the sound of a life collapsing. Some took the side of the millionaire, angry and betrayed. Some pitied her, yes, but pity tasted like salt and could not mend what the voice had undone. I sat still until I felt the hall empty enough for footsteps. Then I stood and walked out the same door she had used to step in as a queen. I did not shout. I did not crow. I only breathed the air, thick with the new quiet, and felt a strange lightness. The weight of shame had been moved from my chest onto hers. Outside, the sky was clear. The town watched as a glittering life folded and scattered like a card house in wind. I walked away with my small suitcase in my hand, the sound of her voice still echoing in my ears, each word a small drumbeat of finality. I had given the world the truth it deserved. I had not sought blood or ruin beyond the exposure. I had simply shown what was already there. And as I left, I felt the old house behind me become a place of memory, not of defeat. I was gone before they could call my name. The silence after the last guest's murmur was sharp, like glass ready to break. The hall had been glowing with laughter seconds before, but now every chandelier seemed to shine on her alone. Her voice, dragged from the recordings, poured into the air like poison made audible. It was not my voice condemning her. It was her own. That was the beauty of it. I did not have to speak a single word. She betrayed herself in front of the very people she wanted to impress. The first words were cruel jokes. She laughed about cheating, about men with money, mocking me for never noticing. The guests froze, as if unsure whether it was a mistake. But then the recordings grew darker. She bragged about stealing from our accounts, about using me until my body gave out, about moving on once she found something richer. Her voice was sharp, unashamed, every sentence dripping with greed. The crowd stiffened. I saw heads turn, eyes widen, hands grip chairs. The fairy tale had cracked. The millionaire's face turned from confusion to disbelief, then to anger. His hands clenched. He tried to stand tall, but his pride was bleeding out in front of everyone. The bride, my wife once, stood pale as wax. Her lips moved, but no words came. She shook her head, tried to wave her hands as if she could swat away the sound. But there was no escape. The speakers carried her sins higher and louder than any denial she could muster. Gasps turned into whispers, whispers into sharp voices. People leaned close to one another, pointing, frowning, repeating lines from the recording. She cheated. She laughed about him. She stole. The guests who had come to witness beauty were now witnesses to betrayal. Every word I had saved in the quiet of my home now marched out in public like soldiers of truth. She tried to walk toward the sound booth, but the millionaire grabbed her arm, his face hard. He wanted answers, but the answers were already in the air. Her cheeks burned red, her eyes wet, but still she could not speak. The recordings played on, each line another hammer striking down the walls of her perfect image. The chandeliers glimmered as if mocking her. The flowers smelled sweet, but now stood as silent witnesses to her shame. I sat in the back row, still, steady, watching. I did not smile. I did not cry. I let the truth do what it was meant to do. The hall was no longer hers. It belonged to the words she had spoken, the lies she had told, and the crowd that now saw her for what she really was. When the last recording ended, the silence was heavier than before. No applause, no cheer, no music. Just silence and the sound of her breathing, fast and broken. The millionaire looked at her as if seeing her for the first time, not the angel in white, but the deceiver in disguise. He pulled the ring from her hand and dropped it on the floor. The sound of metal hitting tile echoed louder than the music ever had. One by one, the guests began to leave. Their heels clicked against the floor like judgment being passed. Some shook their heads, some muttered curses, some refused to look at her at all. She stood alone at the center of a hall that had been built for her triumph, now turned into her cage of humiliation. The fairy tale was dead. The dream had collapsed. And all that remained was the truth she could not erase. I rose quietly from my seat and walked out with the others. No one stopped me. No one even noticed me. I was the poor man she had mocked, the shadow she tried to erase, and yet I had spoken the loudest, not with my mouth, but with her own voice. The collapse came quickly, like a storm breaking glass windows. One moment she was standing in her perfect white dress, smiling at her millionaire prize, and the next she was a hollow figure, stripped of every lie she had wrapped around herself. The room emptied around her, the seats that had been full of admiration now abandoned with the scrape of chairs and the sharp echo of footsteps. Her laughter, her pride, her triumph, all of it drowned beneath the sound of silence and shame. The millionaire did not wait long. He looked at her once, his eyes full of rage and betrayal, and then he tore the ring from her finger. The guests gasped as he threw it down, the small band clattering on the floor like a gavel striking judgment. Without a word, he turned and walked away, his shoulders stiff, his steps fast. No one followed him. The crowd parted, letting him go, leaving her behind as if she carried a plague they could not risk touching. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. She reached for someone, anyone, but no hands met hers. Friends who had once praised her beauty now refused her eyes. The women whispered with disgust, the men frowned with anger, and the old nodded as though they had always known. She was alone, not just on the stage, but in her world. Every mask she had worn had shattered, and all that was left was the truth she could never bury again. Her body shook. She clutched at the dress that moments ago made her a queen. Now only fabric draped over disgrace. Her knees buckled, and she sat heavily in a chair, gasping as if the weight of her sins pressed down on her chest. The chandeliers still glimmered, the flowers still bloomed, but the hall felt darker than any night. I watched from the doorway. I did not walk closer. I did not offer words. There was nothing more to say. The collapse was complete. She had built her castle of lies high, but it had crumbled in a single moment, brought down not by my anger but by her own voice. That was the justice she could never escape. When the last guest walked out and the music equipment shut down, she sat alone in silence, her fairy tale turned to ashes. And I turned away, suitcase in hand, leaving her to the ruins she had created. By the time they searched for me, I was already gone. I did not wait to see her tears or hear her excuses. I did not linger to collect praise or pity from the crowd. My work was finished the moment her own words filled the hall and stripped away her crown. I walked out into the cool air, a suitcase in my hand and peace in my chest. For months I had carried the weight of betrayal, but in one day I laid it down. I bought a bus ticket with cash and sat by the window as the town rolled away behind me. No one noticed me, no one cared. They were too busy speaking of her downfall, replaying the wedding that had turned into a trial. And that was enough. I did not need them to know my name. I only needed them to know the truth. She left me because I was poor. She mocked me because I had nothing. She believed money was power, that wealth could erase loyalty and replace love. But money cannot silence the truth. A diamond ring cannot shine brighter than betrayal. A silk dress cannot hide a rotten heart. She forgot that while she was chasing wealth, she left behind pieces of herself. Pieces I had saved, waiting for the day they would matter. I did not take revenge with fists. I did not burn her world with fire. I let her burn herself with her own words. That is the purest justice a man can give, to hold a mirror up so the world sees what he always saw. And once the mirror is lifted, it cannot be lowered again. Now I walk a different path. I am not rich, but I am free. I have no mansion, but I carry no chains. My years may be heavy, but my heart is light. She is left with shame that no gold can cover, and I am left with peace that no thief can steal. She left me for wealth. I left her with truth, and I vanished forever.